So yeah, I, in the current release, we've got this product discovery issue around confidential merge requests, and there's been a bunch of discussion on it, backs and forwards, and I guess like the objective is really trying to work out where to start with the making things better. And I think as we've been discussing it on the create side, like there seem to be like a couple of components to the problem, and what I think is difficult to know at this stage, or unclear to me, is which are the most important problems. So I guess to unpack the different spheres that we're sort of seeing is that there's kind of one problem, which is like, how do we have like the security release branch and keep that secret, right? Because we need to keep our critical vulnerabilities, like the fixes for them, hidden until they're deployed, which is what we're currently doing with the dev.gitlab. Right, so that's one component. And then I guess there's the other component, which is kind of a workflow related problem, which is how do engineers go from a security issue that's confidential and then workflow that into a fix and then onto the security branch. And I guess like the problem now is that, as I understand it, is that there's an issue on one instance and then they go to a completely different instance to fix the issue, and then that has to somehow like flow back into the GitLab.com server. And so what we're talking about is like, well, we're trying to move away from that two server situation as it is. So, and that can kind of be done already, right? Like if we have GitLab CE and GitLab CE private, which is like a totally separate project, like the workflows become simpler, and that you only have two projects, and they can be in the same group. And if the private one is a fork of the public one, then you can even merge requests between them, right? So there's no problem there. So if we get to that point, like, what are the problems with that situation a confidential merge request should solve? Because if I look at that situation, that is a lot better than the current situation. And it's not clear to me what the priority is, like, and what the specific advantages of having like all of it happen in the one project. Like from one perspective, like I love the idea of just being able to say to someone, hey, you can fix your security issues in the same project. You just like, from a confidential issue, click a button, it creates a confidential merge request, and it's all secret and it just works, right? But then from the perspective of how do we iterate towards that and what's the most valuable thing to solve, it's very unclear to me, like, what the most immediate improvement versus the forking merge request workflow is.
Yeah. So like you said, this was one of the pushes that that we've been doing to move from dev.gitlab.org development to GitLab.com development. And yes, that is simplifying a couple of things. We still don't have the go-ahead to actually execute on it until some security-related items are addressed. But we've been looking into like what kind of problems we are having with having the workflow that you just described, having a fork in a separate project, in a separate group that's completely private. So number one problem that we realized right away is syncing between repositories is still a problematic thing. Ideally, that would have been automated. So if we say that on GitLab.com, let's name the repository, public repository CE, and let's name the private repository security CE, right? That is a fork of public repository. It's in a private project, in a private group, and only certain people have access to it. So when you actually are developing on this private project, CE the public repository is moving. So making sure that master branch or any of the important branches you have is constantly in sync, you need to have a task that will automatically sync that item. Number two, as soon as you merge something into that, yeah, go for it.
Why does the fork need a copy of master? Like, can't that just be, I mean, once you create a security branch, like all the public branches, like the source of truth is in GitLab CE. So if you are local, right, and you say, all right, I'm going to create a new security release, and what you do is you go to check out the public release version of like GitLab 11.8, and then you push that branch to the secure repo. Like, you don't need to be like pulling any updates into that because that's a security release, right?
That's one part of the problem. Another part of the problem is because of that moving target thing. As soon as you have something ready, it's enough for one day to pass by and this branch to change, that when you decide to merge things in, they are no longer mergeable. They're causing failures now in this updated branch that you couldn't see when you were working on. So, right, theoretically, just before the merge, you as a developer need to rebase on top of the latest branch, whether that's master, whether that's security, totally does not matter for this discussion, but it needs to be the freshest possible branch from a repository where all the work is being carried out. So this is one of the things that we are dealing with, like as recent as yesterday when the latest security release went out, is we had, I think, 100 merge requests to deal with, and 90 of them were fine, 10 of them no. So 10 of them required people to go pull code, rebase, change code, and do all of that only because the things were waiting. Like there was no sync between what was happening in the reality versus.
But I don't think that's changed by having them in the same repository. Because like, even if you, like, let's say a single repository version, like where it's all merged in together, like if you have a public release branch and a confidential release branch, they're still going to diverge, right? Even if they're in the same repository, right? You're still having this divergence. And like, it's just like, is that divergence in the same repository or a different fork? I mean, like from a rebase perspective, you still have to rebase them locally for the most part. And so it's just a matter of like, do you rebase on the upstream, like the public remote or the private remote? And I mean, that's just an argument into a Git command. There's no functional difference whether it's branches or.
True, but what would your expectation be with that private branch versus public branch? Would that be automatically synced at some point, or who would be doing the syncing?
I think.
So assume that there is no work going on the private branch at the moment. Who is doing? How is the branch synced? Public versus private.
So like, let's say like 11.10 release branch, right? Or 11.9 release branch, say. And we've cut like a public branch and we've cut a private branch.
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect the private branch to be updated automatically at all.
Okay, that's interesting. Because I think that is where the biggest problem lies.
I mean, I guess the other approach is you could, rather than, so I don't think it's a sync. You can't, it's not the same as a syncing problem, because like a syncing problem, you kind of is like something merges here, you merge it there, and something merges here, you merge it there. And obviously you can't do that. It's kind of like, you have to keep everything on this branch. So I guess like the other way of looking at it is, rather than a syncing or a mirroring problem, is once you merge something into the public branch, you could have like a cascading merge where it triggers a merge request onto the private branch and then like kind of like automatic merge between release branches, which could be a CI job, right? But as soon as you merge something onto the public branch, it then like triggers a CI job to merge it onto the private branch, right?
Yeah.
But then I also think that's not an ideal solution because you've now got public merge requests with conflicts because like the merge request fails and it's got to be like, the volume of public merge requests is much higher than private merge requests, but you're putting the responsibility of resolving conflict onto the public branch.
Yeah.
So that
so that becomes really like, I understand, like I know how complicated this problem is. So maybe instead of like looking for that solution, maybe we can like lay out what would work for us in the situation where you would have a separate project, and maybe with that we would be able to more clearly understand what is the literal MVC before we can move on. So there are a couple of things that I've learned I knew were important, but they were like reiterated as super important, right? So if we have this private project that only certain people have access to, we will have to set up a sync. We can do that manually some way or another. It doesn't really matter. That merge request that gets created on that private repository needs to stay exclusively private, right? Like it can't leak one way or another. So whether the projects are forks of one another or not, that matters only so much as I don't want anything that I do in the private project, I don't want to accidentally have it leak. Right now, if two projects are in the fork relationship, when you create a merge request, it will automatically offer you to target branch to be to the upstream repository, right? So if you fork CE, your fork will automatically try to create target branch on GitLab org, GitLab CE. That can't happen. Like by accident or whichever way, that leakage is not at all allowed. Number two item is, how do you ensure that you don't duplicate issues, right? We have this move issue item, which I think kind of resolves the problem for us, where even if you create this in the private repository, you can easily just click move and the issue will be moved in GitLab CE. And then the final thing for us, or the first one, whichever we want to look at it, is syncing different branches. So ensuring that you're staying on top of things. So I think if you just, or yeah, another one. Final one is ensuring that these two projects have same settings, right? So if you protected a branch inside of GitLab or GitLab CE, you want your private project to have the same setting regardless of whether it's really needed or not, because there are multiple other settings, approvers or whatever else. You want to ensure that that is a one-on-one relationship and that there is no diff between it that could cause you know, someone to have access to merge on this project that doesn't have access to merge on this public project. So those are the baseline items that we would need to address.
Yeah, so the ones, I guess, I've definitely been thinking a lot about the projects having the same settings, because to me that seems like a really big problem. It's like if you configure all these CI variables or your CI settings, things like that,
yep,
having to reconfigure that all over again. I guess, so the other, as I was thinking about that, however, and I'm interested in your thoughts, it occurred to me that that may in fact be a weakness of doing it all in the same project, yep, because most people don't design their CI jobs and such on the basis that they'll be used for like confidential things. And so there could be external services or other things at the merge request job. So like we can easily keep the pipeline transcript confidential. We can make sure the containers and artifacts aren't leaked. Like those
Yep.
things are all in our control. But if someone's got an S3 bucket or some other sort of external deployment where they're deploying like a review app using some external tool, there's no way for us to control the access. And so that could be like an unexpected leakage by just reusing the same CI definition.
Exactly.
So that's I guess the downside or the counter argument to reusing all the same project settings is that you're reusing the same project settings. But I think in most instances, that's like a saner default than having to reconfigure and double manage everything again.
Yep. So I think those are items that I think we'll have to resolve right now when we move, if we move security development to GitLab.com. And we're going to do that manually, most likely. I don't know, we'll probably not be able to do the same for settings, but syncing between branches to keep them updated. I'd probably break the fork relationship between the two projects to ensure that there is no accidental, you know.
What if we what if we changed the way, like if we started introducing confidential merge requests in a more structured way, and if we somehow designated the downstream project as being confidential, and therefore, like, given it's confidential, restrict or change the default merge request behavior. So, for instance, if the fork was listed as confidential, only people with merge permissions could actually open merge requests onto external projects, or people with maintainer access, say.
Yeah. Yep. Or whoever has access in that original project can open merge requests, but only maintainers, maintainers have to approve before certain things get merged or, you know, progress further.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's probably a good idea to like restrict who can. I'm trying to think, like, would there be any situation where a private fork of a public project, like, where you'd want just anyone to be able to open a merge request to merge things public? I mean, it seems like kind of like a sane default. Like, if you've gone to the effort of making a fork private, only the people who've made it private should be able to make the stuff public again.
True.
And if we did that, I think that covers like the obvious use case. We've got a workaround for moving or only one issues. You can move issues, or we could just leave the issues and cross-link them. Yeah. Because if they're on the same instance, you can actually just reference the other issue, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Across groups. Yeah. There's no workaround. I guess like the gold solution that we'd be aiming for, the hardest bar, is like in the one project, so there's no duplication of settings. So then you get to the branch syncing problem. So can you walk me through this just one more time?
No problem. So let's see. There are a couple of cases that we see happen frequently. First of all, even if you have a stable branch, security branch, that is lower than master, right? Like, it only receives updates for security related items, and it hasn't been updated from any of the faster moving branches. You get into a situation where 2 or 3 merge requests touch similar parts of the code base, and if you do not merge them in the correct order, or even if you merge them in a correct order, one of them might get into an issue where you have a conflict or whatever. You know, you can't merge the third one, for example. If you have 3, the third one can be merged because of conflict. Then you, as a developer or whoever is working on that thing, you need to go back and resolve any of the conflict, and then wait for that green thing to pass, and then you're fine. Things get merged, and you're almost done. Well, not really, because now whoever else is doing this release needs to merge the stable branch, so a bit faster running branch. So not the security one, but the stable one, because in the meantime, things moved on, right? So you merge that branch in, but there is like a huge amount of commits now. So what do you do now as a release manager? You go and start pinging each of the individual people who contributed to the security item to resolve a similar or even the same problem that they already resolved in one other place. Maybe in the stable branch, maybe in the security branch, it doesn't matter where.
So just to clarify, so
yep.
What happens is like you've got the public stable branch that's faster moving than the security branch.
Yes.
The security branch. Then you create a merge commit to merge stable into secure.
Yeah.
And then it's on the secure ICs to resolve the conflicts in that merge commit.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, exactly. And what you actually get often as a question is, why couldn't have we done this like just before I merged it, right? Like the branch was updated. I resolved all the conflicts in the stable branches previously. This is now just me doing another piece of work. So ideally, every time you merge something in that security branch, you would have a sync job coming from a location, right? For example, if we define that it's a stable branch, then a stable branch,
okay.
Right? Merge that, and then whoever is doing the work in another merge request would no longer need to do this in two places, because now they can resolve the conflicts right away. Once their thing gets merged, the next item will come on top, you know, and that's how I kind of see it.
Yeah, so I guess like either an octopus merge where you've got like a three-way merge where you've got like stable, like public, secure, like stable, secure, and the feature branch, and either you merge all three in like a single merge commit.
Yep.
And then the process of doing that actually brings in the most recent changes.
Yep.
I guess the other option could be is that, and so that means that there's just like one IC's job whose job it is to resolve whatever the difference is, and rather than resolving it in like a monthly, like this is the next security release, like resolve like 14 days of velocity on the public stable branch.
Yep.
Ideally, we're resolving like a couple of days of velocity at a time as the security fixes merge. There's like smaller chunks to resolve.
Yes, exactly.
But then I guess it's imperfect in that the conflict may not actually be related to the IC security fix. The conflict could be related to anything else that's already on the secure branch.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But it is far from perfect what it is right now.
I just wanted to like point that out.
No. There is no such thing as perfect solution in this case. This is more that, you know, we don't have to go into a situation like we had again now where, you know, one of the release managers goes and pings the person 3 times. We have one person working on the most frequent changed code. 3 times they had to fix a conflict. First time when they were trying to merge this thing into stable.
What about a different approach where as soon as you merge a change into stable, like cherry pick it into the stable public release branch, and that merges, then we cherry pick it onto the security branch at the same time, and it's that the IC, not from the secure branch, the IC who is cherry picking the feature, like because it's currently the developer's job when it gets cherry picked into the stable branch to resolve conflicts. So they merge it into master. If it can't be cherry picked cleanly, it's their job to resolve that issue. If it can't be cherry picked cleanly into secure, shouldn't it also be that same person's job? So it's the person who's merging's job to resolve the conflicts in stable and secure.
Right.
Because in theory, those conflicts should be kind of similar.
Right, but then you have 4 of them, for example. So you do backports as well. So now the person who is also reviewing this or needs to go through all 2 or 3 others. And, you know, it amplifies. The more backports you do, the more of these you need to do. So for example, for our use case, we have 3 backports plus master, that is 4, plus, think you dropped out.
Sorry, my internet dropped.
No problem. Welcome back. Now I distracted myself with something and I completely forgot what I was telling you about.
I think you were talking about the fact that currently there's like three things that have to happen. There's like the merge into master, there's the merge into stable, and then there's backports, and we're adding a fourth so that you actually have to handle the security branch as well.
So what I'm saying is there is master that you're targeting. There is always 3 backports that you're targeting. That is 4 already, and then times 2 because you have to do the same thing for CE and EE. So you have 8.
We're solving that though. We're solving the EDC problem.
We're solving, right? It's not as simple, but the point is for any of the merge requests that you create, you have 4 things to think about. And then imagine you have worked on 2 or 3 of those for this one release. It's going to be pretty annoying to do that all the time when you can resolve the conflict once and ensure that wherever you resolve the conflict, that just gets propagated into whatever you're doing already. And I know this is a hard problem, and probably I would leave it for the last, because a lot of these other things would save your time and you will all of a sudden not have to worry about losing more time, you know?
Yeah. If so the backports process, is that manual or is there a bot that automatically does that?
No, it's currently manual, but there are some scripts flying around that we use that we're trying to make a bit more, you know, set.
Yeah. I wonder if we improve those, like, if we improve those scripts and we also just automatically opened the backports where it needed to happen, and we automatically opened the security merge request. I mean, in most cases, like, hopefully there aren't conflicts. Like, if it was just like open the merge request, set it to merge when pipeline succeed,
then it's mostly fine.
Yeah, because in theory, like, if we could find a way to circumvent the approval process where, like, if the bot is opening something that's already merged and cherry picking it on and it merges cleanly, like, it shouldn't need another approval, right?
Yeah.
If we could solve that workflow problem, that means there's conflicts. Like, someone's got to resolve the conflicts.
Yeah.
There's no way around that.
Yeah.
So, if we can, like, cut out all that other manual work, I generally think the person who writes the code should fix the conflicts wherever the conflicts end up.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
They should be the specialist that knows how to resolve the conflicts fastest, rather than putting it on the poor person that's already working on a security fix, fixing someone else's conflicts.
So here is another thing that might actually be more beneficial for the concept of security merge requests than even this resolving of conflicts. So you're working in a public repository, right? Like, all of our engineers are working in GitLab CE, for example. Your day-to-day workflow is you just automatically push, or you look in at the issue at GitLab CE, and now you need to start working on a branch for the security fix. If we still decide to keep that issue, confidential issue, inside of GitLab CE public repository, it would be ideal if we could have a way to enforce a certain workflow on the developers themselves. So if there is a branch for example, or a button like we have on the merge request widget on the issue to create a branch out of the issue name.
Mm-hmm. So I guess like if you've got a confidential issue,
yeah.
it should really only allow you to create a merge request onto a private project, be that your own personal private fork,
yeah.
or if you've got write permissions to the private security project,
yeah.
it should really only offer you private projects in order to create the branch.
Yeah, exactly. And even possibly like saying something like, oh, you're opening a merge request. Well, I don't know, that's not going to work. Anyway, ignore that one. Better not go in there. But basically try to enforce, like make it super clear for a developer that, hey, you're working off a confidential issue. So your thing can't be in this repository. It needs to be in the private repository.
Yeah. Yeah, and then so I guess there's like the workflow around only like creating the branch in a private location, but then there's also secondarily if you're automatically opening that merge request, which is like the other part of what that button does.
Yep.
That like opening the merge request needs to somehow like go to the right location.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is super difficult. I have no expectation that's going to be resolved overnight, but
yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think through like what the dumb workflow would be. Like, if the dumb workflow was like a user like has write access to the public GitLab CE, and they also have write access to secure CE, security CE, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have a private fork, because most GitLabbers don't have a private fork, they have a public fork of GitLab,
Yep.
right? So we assume like healthy situation where, or like a typical situation, then when they open that merge request from secure CE, the previous thing we spoke about was like, if you're in a secure project, don't allow non-maintainers to open merge requests onto public projects.
Yep.
Then that requirement should automatically be fulfilled. The edge case would be if they had a private GitLab fork, then they would end up in like the situation where, oh no, they would still be caught. It would just like default to their master. No, they would be maintainer. So it would default back to the public one, which would not be good. But maybe we could put a warning on that or somehow. But I mean, that's one edge case that we have to solve, like the default situation where if we tell engineers like, don't have a private GitLab fork, use the private GitLab secure thing, and then the default should work. Like that's serviceable in like the GitLab.com use case in the short term.
Yep. And I think I would be feeling way more confident about the workflow with a separate private repository than this magical, same repository but private and public branches. Honestly.
But that doesn't solve the settings.
Doesn't solve the settings problem, but one item at a time, I would say even.
Okay. All right.
Actually, what if you have, like when you create that relation between public repository and security confidential private repository, what if you blank out all of the settings, so it's read-only, basically, and maybe you add an override for CI variables or something like that to ensure that you can specify whatever is necessary for working on security issues. So that way, like any update in the upstream repository would only trigger an update or, I don't know, would just read whatever it is at that moment in the project.
Interesting. I haven't thought about it in that way before.
Because what is really important here, it's really important, like probably there is going to be a workflow where, you're going to get a company that tells you, well, for the security part, we have different set of approvers, right? So I need to be able to override all of this. But I think as an MVC, just making it like read only and allowing, you know, override per CI variable for build purposes should be sufficient to start.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess that's like if you combine. So there's a feature in the backlog to allow different approval rules and different based on different branches, because like the classic situation is like if I'm doing I'm merging a feature branch into a feature branch, like a front-end engineer is collaborating with a back-end engineer and they want to like merge into each other's branches. They currently need approval to do that.
That's awesome.
Crazy. The other workflow would be like if it's already made it onto master, like the set of approvers needed to cherry pick or merge changes from the master branch into a release branch is totally different. Like,
yep.
You don't need a maintainer to approve that. You need a release manager to approve that.
Yep.
So if we had that setting down, then, or like that set of configuration options, that's providing a nice groundwork for, oh, these security branches, which have different visibility, also have different approvers, which are security and release managers.
Yep.
Cool. This has been very helpful. And it sounds like we've actually got a lot of great groundwork we can do starting immediately that's not implementing this second repository, which is like the hardest problem to solve. It sounds like that's probably like the shiniest and most like streamlined. If I was going to tell someone we've solved this problem, like that's the hard bit, but there's a lot of other fruitful work we can do. So thanks for that.
No, actually, you know, like while we were discussing all of that stuff before our meeting, I realized that I have way more confidence in whatever we currently have set up, right? Private projects, private groups, and so on, than this new thing that has such a huge impact that we don't even know yet. So I was thinking, like, why can't we just reuse that and try to tie those things together? And yes, it's not a proper solution, but it's definitely something that will allow us to see the failure scenarios with as least damage as possible. You know?
Well, yeah, it's like walking thoughtfully and carefully towards a solution, which I think is how we should approach security things.
Yep.
And then trying to like leap from our current situation to some magical future state, and probably falling somewhere in the middle, which is undefined.
Yeah, and you know, we can pair up quite a lot on this. Like as soon as we get the go ahead to move things to .com, we can stay like closely in touch so that you can actually see all of these things working out with us building the custom tooling and trying to wire things together, and maybe you finding an entry there to implement something for us instead of as a bridge.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for your time, Maren. If I was to upload this to GitLab Unfiltered, do you have any problem with that? I don't think we discussed it. Confidential.
Nope, go for it. All right, have a good one. Later.